Confession to make this morning. I got up and got ready to come to church, and I sat down at my desk and I practiced my Sunday lesson twice. And I didn't put it back in my little briefcase. So most of you know that I just returned from the Camino on October 4th. I was planning on talking about that with you next month, but you're going to get it off the cuff this morning. I want to start by sharing with you an experience I had in Amsterdam, because we went to the Netherlands because my great-grandfather, when he was 16 years old, he came to the Netherlands and actually had a farm out where View College is. And I had never been to Holland before, and so I wanted to go see where my great-grandfather had been born. And I took a journey not only to Utrecht, which is where he was born and where his family came from. But while I was in Amsterdam, the other minister that I was traveling with, she came down with COVID. And was coming down with it when we were on the planes leaving. And so I was kind of on my own in Amsterdam. And we had gotten tickets to go see the Anne Frank house. And I have to share with you that it was pretty incredible and very touching to go through the Anne Frank house. And I had read that book in 8th or 9th grade in high school and discussed it and had seen many movies about it, so I'd always wanted to go. But I understood, if you've ever seen the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which I have, I was told after I had seen the Anne Frank house that actually Steven Spielberg had a major part in creating the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And before that design was created, before the museum was created, he actually went through the Anne Frank house several times. And from that experience, wanted people who were going through the museum to be able to experience what the Jewish people experienced when they were imprisoned in the I want to say, the concentration camps. Thank you. But the last day we were there, before we left to go to Spain, I was wandering around, and there was a huge, large community center, or, like, that was probably as big as this building. It had some statues around it, and people would kind of meander through the stores that were located all around it. But in the center of the center was this man, and I ultimately got his business card, and he called himself the Pigeon Man. And he had large sacks all around his stomach with seeds, and he would throw the seeds out for the pigeons, just easily and effortlessly. And of course, then the little kids would come up with him, and they'd beg for food. And of course, he'd take their hands, and some of them would sit down to feed the birds. And of course, they'd flinch a little when the birds would get on their shoulders or on their heads because they had the seed. And he kept resupplying the seed. And so in the European countries who have the euro, they have the $1 and the $2 in a coin. America should go to that, I'm telling you. It's so much easier. But anyway, they had dollar or one euro. And so I reached in my pocket and grabbed a euro, and I went over to him and I said, "Can I have some seed, please?" And I gave him the euro. Now, this is like a entertainer in the square. Remember, there's always entertainers out there in places like this. And so he gave me some for both my hands, and I was standing there patiently, and the birds come up, of course, and sit on your hands. And before I knew it, I was out of seed, but he came over and he put some on my head, on my shoulder, on my hands, and of course then I had a flock on top of me. But I must have stayed there taking pictures and enjoying the birds for at least a half an hour. I was just fascinated. And as I went to leave, another entertainer or somebody from the block that was, entertainer around in the corners, came up to the Pigeon Man And the pigeon man reached into his little fanny pack that was located here and pulled out a 10 euros. And he handed it to the young man. It's just probably a kid, late teens, early 20s. And the pigeon man said, "Here, I have this for you." And the kid goes, "No, no, 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 no. I can't take your money that you've earned." He goes, "No, I want you to have this. I know you're having a hard time." And as I watched that, I was reminded how God is our source. It was the perfect example of how God is our source if we open our hearts to receive. And so the next day, Terry and I got on a couple of planes. We had to go to Madrid, and then from Madrid to a town outside of Ferrol, Spain, and then we took a taxi for 80 euros from the airport to the Ferrol, which is right there on the ocean, and it's on the northern side of Spain, I would say, because it's right there on the English Channel. You can look out and you see the English Channel. And that's where we started one of our 2 journeys. And we went from Ferrol all the way into Santiago, and that was approximately 80 miles that we walked. Not all in one day, trust me. We didn't walk it in one day, but we did walk approximately 7 miles to 13 miles per day, depending upon how far our places were that we were going to be staying. And I had 2 walking sticks, and on one of my walking sticks was, I had put this in my briefcase this last week because when I celebrated my birthday this last summer, Suli sent me this picture. And it's absolutely a magnificent picture. And I looked at it and I thought, I have to carry this with me. Because this is a man walking towards not only the sun, but towards love. And so I put, each one of these represents one of the spiritual practices that I did. And I basically would start spiritual practice in the morning when I got on the trail, and that continued throughout the whole entire day. And the second day we were there, the rain started. And I had a poncho on, and it wasn't much good. Because the wind would come up and it would sweep underneath and blow it up, and I would be soaked through, not only from the rain, but also from the perspiration because of the latex on the inside of the poncho. And I finally took my head off and just left my baseball hat that I had on that said love on the side of it. And reminded myself that that was up there, that I had chosen to do this journey in the rain. As I was walking along, we were going through a mountain range, and when I say it was a mountain range, it was like a hill, a hill, a hill, a hill, a hill, and I thought I had gotten through the mountain range, and I walked around the corner, and I looked at another mountain, and I looked at Terry, and I said, what the? Another mountain. And it was one of those 12 or 13 mile days, and I was really getting frustrated because of the rain, and I was cold, and I was soaked clear through and through. And those of you that know me know I celebrated my 80th birthday 2 weeks before I left for the Camino. And so as I was walking, I kept saying the words to myself, I think I can, I think I can. From the little engine that could. Remember that record that you had when you were a kid? And that's what the little engine would say when he was trying to go up the hill. And I kept saying that to myself, and then all of a sudden some words came from nowhere. And it said, it's not what you've done, Eileen, it's what you have left to do. And I knew that those words were not about climbing that mountain. It was, what is you going to do with the rest of your life? are you going to do for others? And that continued kind of to haunt me as I went along and walked along on that process. And I prayed about it, thinking that, gee, an answer's going to come, and it's going to be really simple when I find out what that answer is. And there was a song, one of the songs that I sang, or a chant that I sang to myself, was called Radiant Christ. And you probably haven't heard it, but it goes, "O radiant Christ, O giver of life, I surrender to you." And then you start to sing about the parts of the body that you're surrendering. I surrender my mind, I surrender my lips, or my voice, I surrender my heart, I surrender my world, I surrender my hands. And all of a sudden, I had gotten through 2 or 3 stanzas of I surrender my mind and I surrender my heart. And out of nowhere came the statement, I surrender my life to you. And I stopped and I said, oh my God. I remembered the verses from Matthew, wondering what was I supposed to do, like the young man who walked up to Jesus that was wealthy and said, what must I do to follow you and to be in heaven eternally? And Jesus said to him, oh, just go out and sell everything and then you can come follow me. And of course the little man or the little young man couldn't do that. And so he walked away from Jesus. And all I could think of was, oh my God, am I supposed to go home and sell my house, sell my car, sell all my belongings and go out and move within the world as he had said? And I got scared. I kind of thought, that can't be the answer that I'm supposed to have. And we continued to walk on each and every day. It took us, I think it was about 8 days to walk the 80 miles that we had to walk. And we were coming close to Santiago. Now, one of the things about the trail is that you need to know is that we stayed in places that gave us breakfast in the morning. And breakfast sometimes was a sandwich without anything on it in Spain. They just would have bread and cheese and meat out for you. God, I longed for a jar of mustard. And a few pickles and a little lettuce. But that wasn't to be had. Anyway, on the other stick that I carried, I had a ribbons. I had sent out ribbons to people before I had left, and I had put their name on them. And I invited them to go on the journey with me. And many of these people were people who had health issues. And I asked them to write on the ribbon what it was that they wanted me to pray for. And I prayed for these people every single day that I was on the journey. I could take the stick and I'd take the ribbon that they had written on, and I would pray what it was that they wanted. And so one of the things that happens on the trail is that usually about 10 or 11 o'clock you come across a cafe. We'd leave around 8:30 or 9. And we come across a cafe, and these are not what we think of as cafes, but you would go in and you could get a cup of tea or a coffee, or the locals would come in around 10 o'clock and get a beer. I'm like, whoa, a little too early for me. But they would, you could get a snack, because in Spain they close down the cafe, or they close down every place to eat, or most of the restaurants, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's closed until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so Terry and I got in the habit of, doing whatever we could at the snack, and then we ate around 4 o'clock in the afternoon because we didn't want to eat at 8 o'clock at night. Right. So we walked into this cafe, and as we walked into this little cafe, they had it was a wooden figure of a pilgrim, an ancient pilgrim with robes and everything, but it didn't have the head on it. so that you could go up and stand there and pick up the pilgrim's hat and put it on and have your picture taken. And so Terry was taking my picture. When we got done, I took the hat off and put it on the pilgrim's hand that was waving. And I turned around and looked, and I saw this woman who had picked up my stick, and she was playing with my ribbons. And I said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "What are these ribbons all about?" And so I proceeded to tell her how the last time and this time, I carried people with me who needed healing or had special requests that they wanted to have. And we walked along. She decided to walk a little ways with us, and she proceeded to tell me how she had walked the Camino, and I could see it on her backpack because there were a bunch of patches for every path that she had walked. She said that she would bring groups over to raise money for a special liver disease. Evidently and she told me the long Latin name of it. Of course, I can't remember what it was, but her daughter, it's a liver disease that attacks young people at about 17 or 18. They're usually deceased by the time they're 22 or 23. They cannot be cured. And so as we walked, and I shared, she shared this with us and talking, she said, "But my daughter has walked 3 times on the Camino on different trails." You need to know that I walked the French Trail 10 years ago when I turned 70, which was, I walked 400 miles in 33 days. So, this was 2 new trails that we were walking. And so as we walked along, she said, "Usually I carry stones. And along the pathway are these concrete signs that stand about this tall, and they're about that big around, and they have both the yellow arrow and the yellow scallop shell on it, which points the direction that you're walking in, or that you're supposed to walk. And when you come across these, you'll notice that there usually are a lot of stones sitting on the top of them or at the bottom. People have names on them. I took a picture of one day that said, "Dad, I really miss you every day." And I knew that this person had probably lost their father. They would leave pictures of the Mother Mary and rosaries hanging from them, or pictures of Jesus. And always when I would see the pictures of Jesus that were on the cross that were obviously in pain, I thought, this person has carried this because of their own pain that they're having. And so I would always stand at the ones that had the rocks and the rosaries on them and bless the individuals that were there because they were walking with a special purpose in mind. And so as she walked along, she said, "I usually carry rocks for all the young people that I know that have died from this or are dealing with the disease right now. And my daughter has it, and I came to do this short trail by myself just because I needed some relief, because she's on the verge of dying. I know she'll die when I get home." And with that, she reached into her pocket and she pulled out a little pocket, or a little bag, those that are like gift bags that people give. And she pulled out a heart. And she said, "I have this heart." And it was a glass heart. And she said, "We make these by taking broken glass and sticking it in there, and then clear glass. We stick it in an oven and it melts it all in the shape of the heart. And the little heart is about 2 inches wide and about 1.5 inches long." And she said, "I always make 2 before I walk, and I give them to other pilgrims who are doing something special for others on the trail. And she said, "This morning I thought I'm going to be going home because I hadn't given out this second one. But if you look at it carefully, the colors of your ribbon are broken within this glass, and I'd like you to have it." And so I accepted it, and we took a picture because I wanted to be able to remember her by that. And I asked for her daughter's name so that I could pray for her daughter. the rest of the time. And she said, I'm going to take your ribbon idea, and that's what I'm going to do the next time I'm walking. I'm going to carry the people with me all the way. So we ended up getting up to Farrell, and Farrell actually is right on the ocean, and in kind of northern Spain. And the Romans named the town of Farrell, or named this place Farrell, in 300 AD. And when they marched there, now think of it as 300 AD, they march there and they see out into the vast sea, but they don't see land anymore. And so it was named Finisterre, or rather, it was named Finisterre, Fine, the end, stare of the world, or the earth. And so they named it Finisterre because of that. And we ended up staying in Finisterre a couple of days just to relax before we actually went off on another trail. And from Finisterre we went to I have a hard time saying it because it's M-U-X-I-A and they say it Musia. The X becomes an S, Musia. But one of the experiences that we had when we were in Finisterre before we went on to Musia was that for several miles that when we were out at other places walking along, we had seen an advertisement on bulletin boards that they had a pilgrim service at the Catholic Church there in Finisterre. And so we walked into Finisterre and out to the point where it was the end of the world. And we then the next night or the next day at 6 o'clock we went back to the service for pilgrims at a Catholic church there. And the church was built in 1200 and was smaller, and then they added on to it in 1400 and added on to it on the other direction so that it became a cross in the 1600s. And the father walked out, and he wasn't much taller than I was, and he was from India. And I'm kind of going, India? Wow, how did he become a Catholic? India. You know, that's Hindu and Buddhist and Muslim country. But he was just this sweet little jolly guy. And he came out into the audience and he said, how many of you speak Spanish? And part of the group raised their hand. And he said, how many of you speak English? And part of us raised their hand. And then he went through every single aisle, and he walked every single aisle and asked every single person in there what country they were from. And there must have been at least about 10 different countries in there. And the visiting priest that was there was from Poland. And so we had part of the service in Polish and part of the service in Spanish. And the Sunday lesson, or the lesson, was given in Spanish, and then he said, now I'm going to talk about this too in English. And he talked about it, love. That's what he shared. How to change the world, we have to be able to give love to other people. We have to walk in that space and that place of love, not just within ourselves, but projecting it out into the world. And that was how we were going to have peace in the world. Now, someplace between Finisterre and Musia, another voice came to me. And that voice this time said, do little things with lots of love, Eileen. And I knew that that was the message, that that's what I was supposed to do the rest of my life, was little things with lots of love. So we spent 22 days walking and staying a couple of days extra in Santiago and in Finisterre to rest. We spent 22 days and walked 160 miles. Wow. They clock it out as meters. And we went up to Barcelona because I wanted to see the Sagrada Familia. Does everybody know what the Sagrada Familia is? It was designed by Gaudi, and it is currently 100 years old, and it still isn't completed. And it's a magnificent place to go in. I spent 5 hours within the structure itself and going up in the towers. The final and the last tower that is being made right now, which will complete the Sagrada, is the Tower for Christ, which has a large star at the top of it. And when Gaudi created or designed the Sagrada Familia, he designed the Tower of Christ to be taller than any of the other 4 towers that are around the church. And he designed it also so that it was not as many feet as the tallest mountain in Spain, because only God is perfect. Only God is perfect. And just to add a little humor to that, I finished up and I walked across the street to the information booth and I said, "Can you tell me how to get back to my hotel?" And the gal looked at me, she said, "Well, do you like the tube or the undertown, whatever they call the thing that goes underground, like a subway, or do you like buses?" And I said, "Oh, just show me how to walk." And she said, "That's 40-minute walk back to your hotel." And I wanted to say, "Honey, 40 minutes is nothing. Draw it on the map." So I got the streets down. So I'm still at this point 3 weeks out at the Camino, and I'm still integrating what transpired in the messages that I received. But I always know that, much like the song from Wicked, it's changed my life forever. That's the end of my lesson.
Thank you so much, Eileen. What an amazing lesson, story. And happy birthday, by the way.